Hi and welcome to Duhawks Burning Questions. I'm your host, Josh Larson. Joining me today at the desk is sports enthusiast Dustin Dawson. Thanks for joining me, Dusty.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
Well, before we start, I'd like to open up the question to the public. Tweet your questions to @Duhawk Burning Questions, and we'll answer them at the end of the show. Now, let's start with a big question around campus, men's soccer. The men's soccer team actually had a great season this year. They lost to Luther in the conference championship, which is surprising that they missed out on the NCAA tournament. Dustin, what's next for these Duhawks?
Well, Josh, it's for the first time in 12 years they missed out on the NCAA tournament, and they kind of got snubbed a little bit, Josh. I mean, Dubuque just down the road, they actually got a bid, but they actually lost to Luther in the semifinals 4-0, which Loras ended up losing to Luther 4-3 in the finals, and the Duhawks won the outright conference championship. So a lot of things around the campus that they just didn't agree with the fact that the Duhawks didn't get a bid.
Well, we saw it around campus. Just the surprising fact that the Duhawks haven't been in the tournament for, they've been in it for 12 straight years. It's a pretty jarring stat to think that this year they will not be making it. And for a team that's so accustomed to being in the tournament, they will not be participating. To them, it's a shock. To us, it's a shock. And I believe you're right. I think they did get snubbed.
Instead, I mean, you look at their stats, they outscored their opponents 58-23. So, I mean, they were a good team all year long. They outscored their opponents 3 goals to 1.28. So, I mean, throughout the year, they were winning usually by a pretty good margin. They had a great goalkeeper in Jacob Peterson. He only allowed 20 goals on the year and had 54 saves. So, I mean, really looking at the stats this year, I mean, they were led by Alex Bradley. He led the team he actually had a team tied with team lead for goals with 9, tied with Kyler Olson. Both of those guys are seniors, so in the question of looking ahead, it's really about to see who these guys are that are going to be able to step up. Next year, they won't have Alex Bradley, Kyler Olson, Calvin Miller, and those type of guys. So, I mean, it'll really be interesting to see how they move forward and really bounce back after a tough snub that they had in the NCAA tournament.
Well, what do you see? You just mentioned all the players leaving. What do you see that's coming next for this next flock of Duhawks coming into Loras?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just getting back to the NCAA tournament. I mean, the biggest thing is that they've been there 12 straight years. So, I mean, they know what it takes to get there. And I mean, last year or the previous year, they made it all the way to the national championship before losing. But I mean, they're a team that's very capable, and they have a great coach, great head coach, and great coaching staff. So, I mean, the biggest thing is just to be able to get back in the NCAA tournament next year, win the conference title like they did this year. And I mean, Josh, they started out the year with a loss to Dubuque, and I mean, maybe that's the reason why Dubuque got the bid and Loras did not. But I mean, looking at the overall record and kind of how far they got in the Iowa Conference tournament, I am surprised that the Duhawks did not make the NCAA tournament. All right, so moving on, how will the men's basketball team do with new head coach Chris Martin and assistant coach Jacob Oswald?
Well, to talk about basketball, I think this team is totally rejuvenated from last year's Coach Gorton-led team. I think word around campus is this coach is new, he's young, he's been participating in the workouts, and I think it's a bright, fresh new vibe for this team and the momentum going into the season. I think they're excited, Dusty.
I mean, they have a great returning scorer in Justin Van Wambach. He averaged 19.7 points per game. And I mean, Josh, that's a little bit less than what he had during the middle of the season. He was scoring almost 30 points a game in that little stretch right there. So I mean, he's definitely very capable of doing great things. I mean, he shot 45%, almost 46% from the 3-point line. So very capable scorer. I mean, you look down the line too. Ryan DeCanio, the sophomore, had 10.5 points last year as well. So I mean, I think just the movement of bringing in a new head coach, and I mean, kind of looking at the basketball program in the past, it's kind of just been kind of stagnant where there's always a lot of expectations coming in, but just really they weren't able to get over the hump. I think with a new head coach, maybe not right away, but I think with a new head coach that could rejuvenate them and really give them a chance to compete in the Iowa Conference.
Well, the tough thing about a new coach is there's new principles to learn, new defensive schemes, and new faces to grow accustomed to. The thing about it is this coach has done is he's brought in new transfers, not only to this group, but new faces can rejuvenate a team and get this program back to where our athletic director thinks it should be.
Exactly. And I mean, looking at the points per game, they were definitely a capable team on scoring. They scored 77.3 points per game last year, but they also gave up 75.6. So, I mean, it's really the biggest thing is just being able to play defense along with their high-powered offense. I think that'll really be the biggest thing.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Dusty. Well, we're going to take a little break. We'll return with some responses to your questions, and we'll send it to a commercial break.
Face-off, a key. Duncan Keith helps out. Reamy goes down, top shelf, and their reaction from Patrick Kane. And got it, tight, score! Now they're taking time off the clock. They're precise. Tries to get it, it's knocked away. And a quick shot is in! Under the crossbar! YGL lead!
Welcome back to Duhawks Burning Questions. Let's check out and see what our viewers would like to discuss. At Fly the W asked, what is next for the Cubs in the offseason? Will they have a big offseason or a quiet one? Is Jake Arrieta staying or going? What do you think, Dusty?
Well, I mean, it's really, first of all, just to talk about how they got here, Josh, I mean, for the first time in 108 years, they finally got uncursed and finally won the World Series in an improbable fashion, too, Josh. They were down 3-1 to the Cleveland Indians. 2 of those games were at Cleveland, and they came back and won, Josh. I mean, as a lifelong Cub fan, I mean, that was an awesome feeling, and I mean, Josh, you probably feel the same way.
Well, the thing about it is, it had to be, the way they won had to be the way it was. It was perfect. It was the most excruciating, drag-out baseball game I've ever seen. It went down to extras, a rain delay, just everything about it was poetic in the way that the curse had to end. And it's just the way it happened to be, and it was perfect. I'm also a fan, and I am ecstatic. And speak about what it meant for Cubs Nation. Just the parade itself. Well, the Cubs, they bring out 5 million people. It was the seventh largest,
insane amount of people.
The 7th largest gathering of people in history, just for a Cubs World Series. I mean, that speaks volumes about what this franchise means to the country, to the world, and what's it going to segue into next year?
Well, I mean, looking at the roster for next year, I mean, you look at guys that are on the free agent market, or at least do not have a current contract with the Cubs, and Jake Arrieta, Aroldis Chapman, David Ross, who we know that is retiring, but I mean, what a way to go out for him. He hits a home run in Game 7, and what a way to go out. I mean, you finally end your career. He was part of the Boston Red Sox when Theo Epstein took over that team and broke that curse too. So I mean, you look at Theo Epstein and what he's been able to do with 2 different franchises. And he's done a great job, Josh. But I mean, moving on a little bit, Aroldis Chapman is a guy we got in the middle of the season, and he struggled a little bit at times. And I mean, there were some times where he did a great job. I mean, for the most part, he came in, shut the door, and I mean, I believe it was Game 5. He came in for, I believe, a three inning, pretty much shutout, and he just did a great job of doing that. And I mean, really moving on, Josh, it'll be interesting to see if they can handle his big contract, see if they can get Jake Arrieta back. And I mean, we'll be talking a little bit about the Cy Young, but he's the reigning Cy Young winner, but he was the 3rd pitcher on the Cubs this year because John Lester and Kyle Hendricks took over and did a great job.
I think with that pitching staff, you're going to get a lot of competition, a lot of bulldog, statistician, battling, because these guys are competitors. It's just the way it is. They are on the same team, but they are competing against each other, just naturally to see who can top each other. And it would be great to have Arrieta back to join that bulldog race again with Lester and Hendricks. But eventually, we're going to have to, get those guys back and see what happens next year. So.
And they already made a move to get Jason Hamill will not be on the rotation next year, as they decided to not pick up his option for next year. So it'll be interesting to see who they bring in there. I mean, just watching a little bit of sports over the past couple weeks, I mean, I think Mike Montgomery might be a guy that comes in and takes that starting role because, I mean, he's done a great job out of the bullpen, and I'm pretty sure he was a starter at Seattle. So it'll be interesting to see if he comes in and makes that transition into the starter for the Cubs next year.
Interesting it will be. Let's go on to another question. Dusty, what do we have?
All right, at MLB Fanatic asked, who will win NL MVP and NL Cy Young?
Well, the NL MVP, I think, is pretty unanimous. I think Chris Bryant has it in the bag for how he's hit and defended this year, especially for a 2-year guy. I mean, it's pretty unprecedented to see a man who can not only swing for power, but can not only spray it around the field. I think the way he swings, it's conducive to an MVP-like season. And, pitchers haven't seemed to figure it out, what the secret is to get him out. So I think he's our MVP.
And, I mean, looking at his stats, I mean, the previous year, he had a great year in his rookie season, 26 home runs, 99 RBIs. But he actually did a lot better this year, having 39 home runs and 102 RBIs. So he made that transition. You talk about the sophomore slump type of thing, but that definitely was not the thing for him and did a great job. But kind of looking at some other candidates, Daniel Murphy and Corey Seager were the other two people that we talked about. And actually, Daniel Murphy, if you're a Cubs fan, he was kind of a pain last year in the NLDS. Because I mean, he had a great series against the Cubs, which the Mets ended up beating them in the NLCS. But I mean, he had a great year this year, 25 home runs, 104 RBIs. And I mean, you look at Corey Seager, he had 26 home runs and 72 RBIs. So I mean, a lot of great competition in the NL. But I agree with you, Josh. I think it'll be Chris Bryant. Just, I mean, not only for his numbers, but just he was a part of a team that broke the curse. And I mean, he did a great job. And along with him and Anthony Rizzo and all those guys, they finally were able to break the curse. And I think that gives him the nod.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time. This is Duhawks Burning Question.